If we're going to look at Stuckism, I think we have to go beyond the group, the movement. We have to go beyond the 20th century. I think it's much more interesting to put it in a wider historical context. So let's go back to medieval art. Its basis was the spiritual, the otherworldly. Its basis was theological. It wasn't looking at this world, it was looking at that world up there. It was looking at the biblical world. That's what counted, because this is a world of sin, don't forget. So how do you depict this other world that you can't see? Well, you don't make it solid, because it's not, it's ethereal. So you've got this flat art, stylised, patterned, gold, lots of gold, because that's the closest thing you can get to the beauty and the rarity of the spiritual. That was fine. And then the Renaissance came along and said, boring, or kind of rather more philosophical approach, but essentially we want something else. We don't want to look at this thing we don't know. We want to look at this thing here that we do know, this world. We're not going to kind of theorise about something like how many teeth there are in a horse's mouth and look at the Bible to work it out. We're going to actually kind of open a horse's mouth and look inside and count and see how many teeth are inside a horse's mouth. We're going to cut open corpses. We want to look at this world, and as part of doing that they went back before the medieval period to the Greek and Roman world, which again was quite materialistically based. The Greek world had a cult of the physical, and the Romans were like pretty materialistic people in themselves, very good at doing central heating, underfloor heating, things like that, very, very useful. They went back to that and started copying lots of it, actually. So you've got these country houses in England built in the 18th century or whatever that look like Greek temples, very peculiar. But the art showed this increasing focus on the material, analysing the material world, trying to make paintings look like basically photographs of the material world, solid. No longer do you get the ethereal, the flat, the otherworldly. You've got this solid world depicted in the way that we experience, the way we touch it. And that carried on from the Renaissance, the High Renaissance, 1500, up until the Victorian age, which is a very solid material age, until we get to the 20th century, when it all goes completely pear-shaped. And instead of believing in the solidity of the world, etc., we now have relativity, we have psychology. People aren't what they appear to be, they aren't what they say they are, they're actually kind of something propelled, manipulated by their own unconscious, and they don't even know what they're doing half the time. And the World War I came along and shattered everybody's ideals, and art suddenly was freed from what it was doing previously. What it was doing previously was defining the material world. But photography did that much better and much more easily just by pressing a button. You didn't have to sit there for like 3 months. You could just sit there for 3 seconds. And from, let's say, post-impressionism through the modernist movements, there's this incredible freedom. You could do whatever you wanted to do. There was no patron to say you should do this, you shouldn't do that. The artist just thought, oh, I'll do this, I'll do that. And then people found it rather exciting and interesting and stimulating. And people discovered all these truths. This is art, this is the true art. Kandinsky said the spiritual in art, abstract. Yeah, and he's right, the spiritual is the abstract. But what about the material? That's only half the story. The spiritual is half the story. No material. Similarly with the surrealists, it's like you're going to the dream world, the irrational. What about the practical world, the mundane world? How does that relate to it? Because if you can't relate the two together, you're kind of a very disassociated person. And in fact, when you look at the story of modernism, you're looking at a series of fragmentations, not the whole vision of art, but a section, a slice of the pie, and each movement thought that its slice was the truth, until the next movement came along and dislodged it. So Fauvism thought, yeah, the colour is what art's about, and Cubism came along and said, no, it's not, it's actually structure, the way we're doing it. And that got rather boring, and then the Surrealists came along and said, actually, we've got to use art to look at the unconscious. And the next person came along, and we ended up with abstract expressionism. No, art's actually just about making marks all over the blooming place. In Jackson Pollock's case, dripping paint is physical. And somebody else will say, no, it's kind of intellectual. You've got to have, like Mondrian, for example, would be, I'm jumping around a bit, but it doesn't matter. It's all part of a one continuum. Let's get down to the geometrical essence of what art is about. And then we got into pop art. Oh, let's just use all commercialism, it's part of our culture, we'll pile that in, which horrified the abstract expressionists. And then the minimalists, of course, said actually we don't bother with anything, we'll just kind of cut it down to as little as we can. And by this time people were going, actually I don't think we can believe in anything, which is called postmodernism. That's the time when you look back on the modernist movements and think, what does it all mean? Can we believe in this? Because everything people have believed in gets devalued by the next movement. So we can't believe in anything, but there must be something to hang on to. Yeah, celebrity, because that always works. Money, you can believe in money because it's real, and we can earn lots of it. Which is a very cynical attitude. So yeah, we'll pile in cynicism. We'll make a virtue of our faults. And let's have irony, because that's what this is. It's just ironic. The whole thing is just a great ironic game. At that point, Stuckism started and said, no, please, no. This is crap. This is absolute crap. You made the right diagnosis that all of these things before were partial and kind of failed, essentially. But that doesn't mean that you can't believe in anything, which is a kind of easy and rather immature and infantile response, actually, to the situation. Let's be a little bit grown up and actually say, let's find and make some values that do work. That's a lot harder to do than just kicking stuff down. It's easy to kick the walls down. It's much harder to build up something new. But that's what Stuckism sets out to do. It says, no, there are still values, there are things we believe in. They're not the things perhaps that people used to believe in, or at least some of them aren't the things that people used to believe in, but some of them are. And there's some things that we need to introduce, and we can actually make something. We're in a very good advantageous position. Let's take all these different art movements, all their different languages. That's only the start of their use. I mean, the English language has been developed for centuries and carries on being developed. I mean, Shakespeare didn't turn around and say, oh, Chaucer's already done it, what's the point of me doing it? He did something himself. And so that's what we can do now with these languages, with Cubism, with Surrealism, with whatever ism you want, Fauvism, Expressionism. We can take the language further and develop it, which is exactly what Shakespeare did when he took the language that earlier writers had used. And that's what Stuckism is doing. It's now saying, yeah, we've got the advantage of all of this. We can see what worked, we can see what didn't work. And we need to affirm something. The 20th century paradigm was one of progress, newness. It's like, if it's new, it must be good. We don't believe that anymore, because a new insecticide, more powerful, stronger, is the last thing we want. What we want is something organic, for example, in terms of food and vegetables. We want organic vegetables. Never used to be called organic vegetables, they just used to be called vegetables. And the 21st century paradigm is one of conservation, of holism, seeing the whole picture and preserving what's worthwhile, because there's already too much destruction. We don't need questioning, we don't need challenging, we don't need kind of to undermine values, because there aren't any left. What you need is to be able to build up values. To be challenging in art is a complete cliche, and it's completely unchallenging because everybody does it, and the establishment just says challenge, challenge, challenge. You know, newness. Oh, new materials. This material hasn't been used. That material hasn't been used. You know, oh, crime. We'll use a sharp. We'll use a bed. We'll use bread. You know, we'll use suitcases. We'll use potatoes. I mean, sorry, we've already got all these things. We've already got potatoes. We've already got suitcases. We've already got sharps. We've already got beds. It's not a very clever thing to do anymore. It's not very helpful. It's not very illuminating. It's just pandering to the tastes of a jaded art establishment whose belief rests on basically celebrity and money, and in due course, when values become asserted and contemporary establishment art is viewed in terms of values, then it's going to fail very badly.